Everybody, well, let me also welcome you all to church today. I'm so glad that you could be here, whether you're in the room right now at our Alton Darby broadcast location, or if you're in the room at one of our other campus locations, or you're worshiping online. So glad that you all could be here today. My name is Jackson, if I've never gotten to meet you, and I get to be one of the pastors here at Cypress and serve in a variety of different roles. One of those things includes the incredible privilege of being on the teaching team. And it's been a little bit since I've been back with my whole Cypress family in this role, and the reason for that is because my wife, Olivia, and I, we officially have new titles. All right, we are officially parents. We welcomed our little boy, Keelan Blake Murphy, into the world on July 22nd, and man, we are loving, thank you so much. Thank you all so much. We're loving the joys and the challenges and everything that comes along with it, and this is a legitimate conversation that Olivia and I had leading up to his birth, when we were kind of talking and dreaming about, like, what is he going to look like? And we were looking at both of our baby pictures, trying to figure it out. And I told Olivia, I said, let's not get our hopes too high, because in my opinion, I said, I kind of think all babies just look alike. Like once they get to like 1 or 2 years old, you can kind of see what they're going to look like. But I was like, kind of all babies, they really look the same. And then I had my baby. Okay, so I did bring just a couple pictures that I wanted to show you. This is the first one. This is from his newborn shoot recently, and we love getting to do that together as a family. And then the second one was one I was sent just a few days ago, and it took everything in my power not to just drop what I was doing and run home to come back to him. And then I brought one video. Now, it's a very short video, but it's something I watched probably 200 times, and I have to share this with you. Is that not the best sneeze that you've ever seen? And I told a group earlier this week, I said, my plan for the sneeze, I'm always going to have it saved on my phone, and then the first time that he talks back to me, I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to watch it and remember how cute he used to be. And so that's my plan with the sneeze, but really and truly, we're so overwhelmed with just the encouragement and just the gratitude for being a part of this community, even so many of you from other campuses that have reached out just to express support and encouragement, and so thank you so much. I've been asked by multiple people, what are you learning? Like, what's the main thing you've learned as a dad? And then I usually say, how much time do you have? Because it's growing every day right now. But the number one thing is your perspective on sleep. It completely changes. And here's what I mean by that. My whole life, as long as back as I can remember, I've always thought 5 hours of sleep was kind of like, that was a tough night. Like, I'm going to need a nap tomorrow. But I've gotten 5 hours of sleep the last few nights, and I'm ready to preach today. All right, I feel incredible. I'm so excited. And if you've been with us in the month of August, we've been in this series called Trust Issues. And Pastor Ken, he's done such a great job of leading us to this point of really examining just different parts of trust, different things that have come up in our past and what that means moving forward. And in Trust Issues for week 4, what we're going to do to wrap up the series, a lot of this series has been focused on things that have happened to us in the past. We've sort of been looking out the rear view mirror, and it's important to do that because you have to be able to recognize what are maybe some warning signs I may have missed, what are some mistakes I would have made, what are things that I can learn moving forward. But eventually your perspective has got to change from looking out the rear view mirror to looking out the windshield. Because eventually you have to ask, what is the future that God has for me and my relationships? What can I take? What can I learn? And this is the weekend where we change our perspective, where we start building and dreaming about the future of our marriages, our business relationships, our family relationships, and so much more. Okay, and as you're looking out the windshield, imagining the future, I want you to imagine with me that you come along the road and you find this road sign, and it says to proceed with caution. This is how we have to navigate trust as we all move forward in this series. You have to proceed, but I'm going to ask you to do it with caution. And the reason I say that is you have no choice but to proceed. You have to trust in this life. And I have some people that have told me, Pastor Jackson, I've been burned so bad, like you don't understand. I don't trust people going forward. And what I would tell you is that's not possible. Because when you leave your campus today and you're driving home or you're driving to lunch, you're trusting that everyone on the left side of the road is going to stay on their side. And then when you stop for lunch at Chipotle, or not Chick-fil-A today, but hopefully later this week, you're trusting that the way that they're preparing your food and making your meal is not going to make you sick. So if you're going to eat food, you're trusting the people that work there. You literally cannot go through this life without trusting people. So you have to proceed, but I'm going to ask you to do it with caution, to think about it a little bit differently than maybe the way you jumped into it before. And I love this quote by a guy named Albert Einstein. It's not in the Bible, but he said that the thinking that got us to where we are is not the thinking that will get us to where we want to be. And part of the goal of this whole series, but especially this final week, is just to challenge us and give us some maybe new ways of thinking about things. And so if you ask yourself, all right, what is it going to take to rebuild trust, to trust again? The first thing that I would tell you is it is going to take time. One of the things that Pastor Ken shared last week is that time alone will not heal your situation. And that's so true. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you that the process of rebuilding trust, it is a much more lengthy process than we might hope or realize. And oftentimes we want a microwavable solution where we can just put it in there and then come back tomorrow and be able to move forward. But rebuilding trust is not like that. And as you take the time that you need, because if you are the one that was burned, you need to take time to be healed, and you have people surrounding you and you're walking that healing journey, eventually you're going to be ready to consider a question. And the question that you're going to be ready to consider is this: it's, what do you really want? Like, take time and actually consider in this relationship, what do you really want? And I'm not talking about forgiveness here, all right? You're going to forgive. You're going to release that person like we talked about last week, and you're going to move forward. But then once you forgive and the relationship is restored, that does not automatically equate to trust going forward. Forgiveness doesn't automatically mean that you have to trust that person. And sometimes I think that we automatically assume that in order for me to be completely healed and completely restored, I have to get back to exactly whatever the relationship was like before. There's sometimes that the best future that God has for you is going to involve different relationships for you to encounter. The Bible said there's sometimes where the new wine, it needs new wine skins to be held in. So sometimes as you consider what do you really want, it might be moving on from a certain relationship. There's other times, though, when you consider what do you really want, God might be leading you back to that same thing and considering the question, what would it take to trust again? And if that is the way that God's leading you, a question that is going to come up very soon is, okay, but how can I know for sure that this person will not do what they did before? And the unfortunate reality is you can't. Nobody can know the future. Nobody knows what people are going to do. So to not trust anyone or to trust someone again, they're kind of equally, there's negative options for both of them. But when you consider that, what do you really want, and then you start trusting again, what I want to give you this weekend is the ability to not just look at present behavior. Are they still lying? Are they still cheating? Are they still doing the same things they've always done? But I want to give you the best indicator that I think of future behavior. And it's to consider this type of a question: is this person, are they pursuing a path that will make them someone who will not do what they did before? We're not looking for perfection, but we are looking for progress. And this weekend, in the final week of the series, I pray that this is an incredibly applicable teaching that you'll be able to really read and compare and think, is this person trustworthy going forward? And what I want to do is I want to give you 6 key indicators that help answer yes to this question. And so it's 6 key components to know whether or not someone's pursuing a new path, and these are 6 things that I'm telling you, they have to be present in order to rebuild trust in your future. And if you're taking notes on the app, there's a whole bunch more scriptures and things than I'll even be able to get to today. But I'm going to start with the first key component, the first thing that has to be present, and it's complete ownership. In order to rebuild trust and to trust someone going forward, there has to be complete ownership over pain, problems, and everything else that was caused in the past. And complete ownership looks like when someone could admit what they've done and it's followed up with no excuse, with no other reason but to truly just admit it. And this isn't just true in our relationships or in the church world. complete ownership, it's embedded itself in our American culture. And you can think about the legal system, for example. There's reduced jail sentences, there's other leniencies. When someone can truly own what they did, admit their mistake, truly show remorse, this is something that is everywhere if you really think about it. And the Bible talks about when you've messed up, there's two different types of people that have two different types of responding to these situations. The first group of people are people who the Bible says are wise. Now, when you hear wise, and when I hear wise, I think of like just smart people, right? You think of Harvard, MIT. When I think of wise, I think of anyone that scored higher on their ACT than me, which is probably most of you, honestly. I was a late bloomer in that regard. But when you think about the wise is not people smart or book smart or IQ. It's something much different. It's the ability to listen, to own your behavior, to apologize, to learn from it, and then to behave differently in the future as a result. And Solomon said it this way in Proverbs 15, where he said that if you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. Now, just a couple weeks ago, we had 7 days of prayer as a church, and there were so many of us engaged online and here at the Alton Darby campus, and I got to meet someone on one of the nights who was from one of our other campuses, and he was a younger guy than I am, and he was talking about how in the first couple of weeks of this series, he felt like God was pointing out different areas in his life where he had given others a legitimate reason to not trust him. And he said he was kind of wrestling on what to do and how to reach out and apologize, and I encouraged him to do that. And he had a meeting set up in a couple of weeks with one of those people. And what I ended up telling him, I said, I don't know what the future that God has in store for this particular relationship is, but I know that with that spirit and with that attitude, God has incredible plans for your future. And the reason that I say that is because God can do more than we can even imagine with a truly humble, hungry to learning posture. When you walk through life and own your mistakes, it's amazing what God can do. Humility is the bedrock of changed behavior. And wise is not knowing all of the answers, it's coming forward with that posture and being willing to learn. Now, on the other side, if you're not wise, the Bible says that the other group is described as fools or mockers. The alternative to owning your behavior completely is in some way, shape, or form to say, it's not my fault. Now, sometimes people will literally say that, and they make it easy on you. But other times, when people say, it's not my fault, and they're not owning their behavior, it comes in various forms of avoidance of responsibility defenses. And I brought a list of some of these ways that people say, it's not my fault. And a couple of them are things like denial or things like lying. Now, there's a whole list I'm going to go through, but these two, I will tell you, these are usually the easiest to be able to acknowledge and recognize in your life. When someone denies something and there's evidence right there or lies, that's one way people say, it's not my fault. Now, I've shared this before. I grew up with two younger brothers. Right? I was the oldest of three. And growing up in our home, there were times where we all got caught lying in certain ways. And one of my favorite stories is there was a time where we were all hanging out in the basement. And I remember we were much younger at the time, and my dad ends up calling us upstairs. And he says, boys, I need you to get up here. And by the tone of his voice, you could tell this wasn't like I brought you home something, boys. This was we have a problem that needs solved, boys. And so we all come up, and I'll never forget, he has us all get around the kitchen table, and we're looking at the table, and we notice something, and he says, boys, it appears as though right here on our kitchen table, someone has grabbed a knife and carved their name into our table. And he starts looking around. He says, it looks like on the table, it says Peyton. And I have a brother named Peyton. But he looks at me as the oldest first. He says, Jackson, did you carve this into the table? And I looked at them all, and I said, no, I did not. And he goes, Mac, did you carve your name into the table? And he says, no, I did not. He goes, Peyton, did you carve this name into the table? And he looks at everyone, and he says, no, I did not. Just follows like everyone else did. And then one more time, he looks at Peyton again. He goes, Peyton, Peyton, P-E-Y, and he goes through it, and then the tears came, and then he admitted it. He got caught lying. Now, Peyton is doing very well right now. He's learned from that mistake. But we all got caught in those funny situations. But that's an example, a funny example of what it looks like when someone is just outright denying or lying about something. It's the easier one to catch. But there's times in your life where if trust has been damaged, avoidance of responsibility, it's not quite that easy to acknowledge. And there's other things that it can be in the form of things like gaslighting. And if you've never heard of this, I would encourage you to look it up and research it. It's fairly new, but it's a form of manipulation where the perpetrator tries to get you confused in your own thoughts and says things like, I'm your spouse. I would never do something like that to you, when in reality, it's clear that they have. Or why would you, you're crazy if you think that. They're trying to gaslight you, but there's other things that people will avoid responsibility with, and it's things like blame or excusing. So maybe they're partially admitting where they went wrong and what they did, but then they're also finding something else and saying, well, the reason that I did that is because I was raised that way. And listen to this, with your family of origin, there's different things that you can recognize and you can acknowledge of ways that you were raised and how it affects you today. You can name it, but you can't blame it. Eventually, as an adult, you have to be able to own your behavior and own your words and say, this is something that I'm going to learn from and move forward with. And then just to round out the rest of the list, other things people will do is they'll minimize your feelings, they'll rationalize and explain why they did something or invalidate the way that you're feeling. All of these behaviors, they are a major roadblock when it comes to building trust with someone moving forward. And when you think about complete ownership over other people's mistakes, but also with your mistakes, what category of those two people would you be in? Would you be among the wise, or would you be someone considered more like a foolish person or a mocker? And I love the way that Solomon contrasts these two different people. In Proverbs 9, he says that anyone who rebukes a mocker will get an insult in return. Anyone who corrects the wicked will get hurt. So don't bother correcting mockers, they will only hate you, but correct the wise and they will love you. Instruct the wise and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous and they will learn even more. You can be wise, you can be a mocker, but the first thing that is required to build trust moving forward, it's complete ownership. All right, the second thing that has to be required in order to build trust is internal motivation. In this life, there are two different types of motivation that we all experience. There's internal motivation, which is a desire within me, and then there's external motivation, which is something outside of me. And motivation is what answers the question why behind any sort of behavior change. And here's what I mean by this. If the only reason that someone is changing their behavior is to restore the marriage or to build the business relationship back together, then once the marriage is restored or the business is back in order, it's just going to be a matter of time before that same way of thinking and behaving starts to resurface. But if the desire to change is tied to becoming the man or the woman that God has designed me to become, then that's an example of internal motivation. Now, there's a guy his name is Dr. Henry Cloud. He's a CEO and author. He did a lot of the work that really went into this series of trust issues that we've been going through together. And he started a new business one time, and what it was going to be is it was going to be performance coaching for some of the top CEOs for the biggest organizations in the world. And when he was starting this business, he had a theory, and his theory was that a lot of the organizations that were in the bottom 10 or 20%, the ones that were struggling to meet budget, they were struggling with different staffing models, they would be the ones that would reach out and that would take advantage of these new coaching opportunities that he was going to offer. But his theory was completely wrong. It was actually some of the top 20%, the ones who were thriving, the ones who were growing, those were the ones that were reaching out in order to get his coaching to try to get better. And you might ask, why is that? It's because they had internal motivation. Their motivation was not tied to the external circumstances of their organization. It was tied to becoming the best that they could truly become. And what's fascinating about internal motivation is it's one of the main themes that you can see throughout the entire Bible. And what I mean by that is if you go back to the Old Testament, when the Israelites were being led by Moses, Moses went up onto a mountain. He got the 10 Commandments, and they were on these stone tablets. And he came down, and these were the laws that the people of God, they had to follow. Now, eventually, the stone tablets, they turn into scrolls, but the scrolls, they're laws that are written down that you have to read, you have to review, and then you have to abide by. Well, think about the New Testament world. We still have the law. It still has its value. But Jesus explained when he was here, he said, people are no longer tied to the law in that way. I'm upping the ante, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually write it on your heart. And it's in Hebrews where the author explains this a little bit more. And he says, this is the new covenant that I will make with my people on that day, says the Lord. He said, I will put my laws in their hearts and I will write them on their minds. In other words, he's saying the motivating factor that's going to craft your behavior is not going to be something on the outside of you. I actually want it to become your own desire. This is internal motivation. And I'm just telling you that when your motivation for building trust in your relationships is tied to becoming the best person, the most loving spouse, the best friend, the best coworker that you can be, then the sky becomes the limit for your relationships. It's not something to get, it's someone to become. That's what internal motivation is. All right, the third thing that I want to talk about that, again, has to be present to rebuild trust is it's a trustworthy track record. A trustworthy track record. Now, most of this series has been focused on different ways that our trust has been damaged in the past. But if we're all going to be honest, I'm sure there's times in all of our lives where you've been the one who's damaged someone else's trust before. And I was thinking back to a time in my life that everyone in my family of origin, the family that I grew up in, everyone talks about this and knows what this is, but I went through a season during my sophomore year of high school that is openly referred to now as the sophomore slump. All right, it was behavior, it was a whole lot of issues, it was really a lot of things that just started compiling. I was struggling in school, I was sleeping in class, I had a lot of areas that I could grow in. And it all sort of culminated one weekend when my parents were going out for a night, and we had some of our friends over, and my brothers and I, we were in a season where we were all about airsoft. Right, like airsoft wars, airsoft guns. For anyone that doesn't know, it's like the little plastic BB pellets you can shoot at people. If you have boys, it's perfect because it doesn't break the skin, but it leaves a mark and hurts. So we absolutely loved it, and we were in that season where that was like our thing. And the number one rule was just no shooting the guns in the house. We had a couple things broken, so there was a big new thing: no shooting at all in the house. And then I remember my parents, they went out for the night. We had our friends over. And about 5 minutes after they left, the whole house had been prepped for just the most incredible airsoft war. And so we had our war. We knew what time they were coming home. And so when the alarm went off of, all right, it's time to start cleaning everything up, we start to get the vacuums out. We're sweeping everything up, putting everything back. And the good news is we got every BB up. There was no evidence of pellets. But the bad news is you couldn't see it when the TV was off. But when the TV was on, you could see where the pixels had been destroyed by BBs. And this time when he said, boys, get up here, I thought the house was burning down. And so all of us, we all run up, and we got in so much trouble. I remember the friends get sent home. We get everything taken away. You all, we were on COVID lockdown before COVID lockdown was a thing. Like really, for the next couple months, we were not allowed to do anything. But I'll never forget this. I remember my dad sat me down, and he looked at me, and he taught me one of the greatest lessons on trust. And he said, Jackson, I love you, but I do not trust you. He said, because this has happened, I love you just the same. I love you more than I ever have, but I do not trust you, and it's going to be a really, really long time before you can build that trust back. And what he was explaining is what I was going to have to do over the next several years is develop a trustworthy track record, to start doing things consistently so that eventually, 12 years later, I could get to a point where he could trust me with different things. Jesus is the one that said it. He was talking to his disciples, and he said, it'll be known that you're one of my disciples by the fruit that you bear, by the things that you do consistently, not by the things that you say, not by your intent, but when you do the same thing over and over and over and over, that's how you develop a track record, and that's how you become trustworthy. Okay, so the first thing, it's complete ownership. it's internal motivation, it's a trustworthy track record. All right, the fourth thing that has to be present in order to develop trust in your future is you have to have healthy boundaries in your life. Now, we've talked about boundaries before, and I do want to clear up one misconception, because when I've helped talk to other people about boundaries, I've had people that have said to me, Pastor Jackson, I don't do boundaries because I feel like I can't tell other people how to live their life or what they should be doing. And I want to make sure we all know boundaries, they have nothing to do with other people. They really and truly, they have nothing to do with other people. They have everything to do with you. And so I want you to imagine this with me. Imagine your neighbor. He has his trash barrel that's just completely overflowing. All right, stuff's coming out of it. The grass hasn't been mowed in months. Stuff's blowing all over the yard. They might have a newborn, so that might be part of the reason that the home looks like that. But I want you to imagine that there's nothing that you can do at that point. I mean, you could encourage him to get his house in order and to clean it up, but unless he's crossed onto your property, there's nothing that you can do. Now, once the trash blows onto your yard, that's where it can now warrant a conversation. That's what boundaries are. It's not about dealing about how other people think or how they talk. It's about setting guardrails up in your life so that it's less likely that you become their victim. You can't control that mean, manipulative people are out there. You could spend your whole life trying to fix this problem, and it's not going to happen. This is human nature. This is sin nature. Those kinds of people are out there. But what you can control is what you allow to yourself. And so I want to give you an example. I'm going to give you a quote that you can use. And I want you to notice that the word you, it never once appears in this. Boundaries are saying things like, I do not allow myself to be treated that way. So until we can address it and clear it up, I can't move forward. So let's get real practical. All right, at Thanksgiving this year, if there's usually a political fight that breaks out at the end of every dinner, the first thing I would say is there's definitely going to be one this year, right? So just get ready for that again. But what it is it's not saying, hey, guys, we can't do this, we can't talk. It's just getting up and removing myself from the situation. That's what boundaries is, and I hope this makes sense. But it's not controlling other people's behavior, what they say. It's about setting these things up for yourself. The fifth thing that, again, has to be present in your life as we all rebuild trust in our future, it's finding and surrounding yourself with the right people. You have to find the right people in this life. We all have people in this life, and whether that's coworkers, whether that's family, whether that's people that you know from the gym or you see at the grocery store, but do you actually have the right people in this life? I love what Solomon said about finding the right people. In Proverbs 24:6, he said that don't go to war without wise guidance, and victory depends on having many advisors. The two things in this life that you have to experience victory, and it's victory in your relationships, it's wise guidance and it's many advisors. Now, when you think about evaluating someone's trustworthiness and trying to decide whether you should enter back into that relationship, whether you should trust that person going forward, you don't need anyone else to sign off on that. That is a decision that you are going to make and you are going to own, but we all have blind spots, so it's important that you have the right people in your life to seek that guidance from. Now, this is something that we want more than anything for you to experience at Cypress. Cypress it's a large church, many locations, a lot of people, but we place such a strong emphasis on community, and we want to do whatever it takes to help you find that. And we say this all the time, but the two landing spots we want for everyone is a small group to belong to and then a difference maker team to serve on the weekends. And if you haven't been to Getting Started, again, you can go through that, you can find your people. But right now, our small group directory is open. And so I would encourage you at some point, just browse it, check it out. If you have any questions, ask your campus pastor. Some people from our team, they got to sit down with a guy recently. His name is Ben. He and his family attend here at the Alton Darby campus. He serves in a variety of different roles at our church. And just got to ask him a little bit about what finding the right people and the difference that that's made in his life. And to hear a little bit more about Ben's journey here at Cypress, let's check this out together.
My small group is about 6 couples, and most of us are in that crazy phase where we have young children and have about no energy left at the end of the day. My favorite thing about our group is just the fact that I have this close group of friends that we have a regularly scheduled time. You know, you make it when you can. You've got a group of people that I know when we have something we need prayer for, we can reach out to. Also, we had this amazing guys trip. So just the dads, just being able to spend time again, with each other and sharing our stories and our past and just really being able to connect as men, sitting around the campfire, enjoying a great weekend. But it truly has made a difference in my family's life, and I have lifelong connections through my small group. Being in a group's helped my family take the next step relative to where we are right now with little kids. We had been disconnected, so really joining the group allowed us to get connected here at Cypress. It wasn't long after I joined the group that then I was serving the I'm news station here at the 9:30 at Alton Derby, so I'm able to bring my kids and they're running around having fun every morning as I'm serving and just saying hey and welcoming new people. My name is Ben, and I love my small group.
I love Ben's story. And thank you so much, Ben, for sharing that. And again, we don't just want this for Ben, for me, for any single person. We want it for all of you. And so if you have not found your community yet, make sure you start taking those steps, because if we gear up for this fall, it's just the perfect time to really jump into this community. You all, we've covered a lot of ground this series. There's been a lot of different emotions that I think have been stirred up with different people. And we've talked through this weekend, what are some of the key components that are really required as we start looking forward to the future and rebuilding trust. And again, just to kind of recap where we've been this weekend, the things that are required to build trust in your future, it's complete ownership over past mistakes, over pain that's been caused. It's internal motivation. It's not a motivation that's tied to getting a certain relationship or getting a certain platform. It's really tied to becoming the person that God designed you to become. And the third thing to look for is the trustworthy track record. It's going to take time. It's going to take consistency, but it's doing the same thing over and over to make you a trustworthy person. We've talked through healthy boundaries. We've talked about the right people. I don't know if you remember, but at the very beginning, I told you that there's 6 key indicators, things that are required as we all build trust going forward. And the final piece that really makes this all come together is you have to have God's leading in all things. And I don't know about you, but it can become so easy in my life to pick and choose different places that I allow God to lead and then other places that I kind of want to blaze my own trail. And whether it's God, for these relationships, man, they're all yours, but for this thing or this hobby or for this thing that I do at work, we have to get to a point where we say, God, we truly want you to lead it all. We want to give you every part of our being, every part of our relationships. And in this series now, we have the tools, we have the knowledge, but it's allowing him to lead us into our future. And what I've done is I've asked our campus pastors, they're going to come back in a little bit and really just kind of wrap up this whole series together. And I've asked the worship teams at all of our campuses to lead us in another song. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask everyone at all of our locations, if you would just go ahead and stand up with me. You can stand right where you are. And as our teams get ready to lead us, and as your campus pastor gets ready to come back to wrap it up, I want to give you something to think about. We've spent a lot of time thinking about things that have happened in all of our past. There's probably been a lot of thought about where you are today and things that you need to do. But over the next couple songs, I want you to start thinking, praying, and dreaming about what God has for your future. It's time we start looking out the windshield, you all. God has amazing things in store, and we're going to give him the rest of this day. So God, I thank you so much for this series. We thank you for what you've been doing in and through this church. And Lord, I just pray that for every person that's listening to my voice right now, I ask, Lord, that you would give them hope. Allow them to know, God, that you have made them on purpose for a purpose, that you have wonderful plans for their relationships, their family relationships, their work relationships. God, we know that there is hope in your name, and we are giving you the rest of this. We love you. We have arms wide open. It's in your name that we pray, Jesus. Amen.
I am an instrument of exaltation, and I was born to lift the name above all names. You hear the melody of all creation. But there's a song of praise that only I can bring. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. You are the infinite God of the ages. Yet you chose to make my heart your dwelling place. You heal my brokenness, show me your glory. So I have songs of thanks, not even angels sing. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus. Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one, only you, Jesus.
So now that it's just back with our campus, I feel like I have something I need to confess to you all. And that's that this whole raising a newborn, raising an infant thing, this is a whole lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And Olivia and I, we were having a conversation, and this is after we made lap number like 400 around the kitchen table at 3 a.m. And we finally got him back to sleep, and we started talking about how hard this was. And we started then talking about some of the other hard things that we had done in our life. And we just started reflecting on different things, and we thought things like saving money is hard. Doing things like moving out of state, that's something that's hard. Starting a new job is hard. Waking up early is hard. Obviously, raising a family is hard. And think about this in your life. There's nothing worthwhile on this side of eternity that's not going to be hard. So if the bad news is that relationships are no different, right? Relationships are hard and trust issues are normal. The good news that we have is that you weren't designed to do it on your own. But this final thing that we just talked about, God actually wants to lead you in all things. Be the one guiding your relationships. Think about this, you all, the creator of the universe, the one who spoke and the world came into form, he actually wants to guide you and lead you. And what's so cool is that if you look at the Bible, probably the number one most popular verse in the entire Bible on the whole topic of trust, it has to do with this exact topic. And Solomon wrote in Proverbs 3, he said to trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not lean on your own understanding, but seek his will in all that you do, and he will show you which path to take. And so that's what we're doing this weekend. As we wrap up trust issues, we're saying, God, we're giving you our relationships. We're giving you all of us. We're asking you to be the one that leads us. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do, as long as you're comfortable with it. If you would just stick out both of your hands like this, I promise nothing weird or crazy will happen to you, but it's just a symbolic way to show, God, we're giving you ourselves. We're giving you our futures. We're trusting you with our pain. We're trusting you with our burdens. And we're asking you, God, to lead us into the relationships of our future. And so, God, that is our prayer this weekend as we wrap up trust issues, that we're choosing to believe. We're choosing to trust, God, that you have the perfect plan for our lives, and we're submitting it all to you. God, we thank you for our experiences up to this point. We thank you for the hope that you have in our lives, and we're giving you ourselves today. God, lead our relationships, lead our marriages, God, lead our business relationships. We're asking you to be the one at the forefront of our hearts, and we're making this our declaration as a church. We love you, we praise you, and we're giving you all of us today. And everybody in this church said, amen. Amen.